Pursuit of Truth. This is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. We are back and we got some Q posts and we're going to get started on them right away. So I hope your coffee's hot. Let's get going. Don't be scared, homie. Post 3819 is where we last left you, intrepid explorers, 17 minutes after the hour of 11. I know, right? Read number 1, then we got a link. Read number 2, we got another link. They are both to the Miami Herald. 5-5, meaning loud and clear. Welcome to the Democratic Party. Well done, Anons. First one takes you here from December 4th, 2019. I'm not afraid of you.
Don't be scared, homie.
Debbie McCarcel-Powell embraces Trump impeachment role. In the midst of a riff on trade policy during a campaign rally in Sunrise last week, President Donald Trump name-checked Representative Debbie McCarcel-Powell, a Miami Democrat who will have a say in this week's impeachment hearings as the probe shifts to the House Judiciary Committee. Yet House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats, they have just done nothing, Trump said to his supporters. They're doing nothing, folks. They're doing nothing. It's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing. So Congresswoman McCarcel-Powell, where is she? Is she here? I'd love to see her. And Congresswoman Donna Shalala. McCarcel-Powell responded via video by noting her work on impeachment, which for months was a political third rail for many Democrats in a competitive districts like her Miami to Key West seat that has frequently changed party hands in the last decade. Okay, so we got another tough talker here, and surprise, surprise that this is in southern Florida, right? So this is the meat of the matter. Let me skip you down here. For the sake of transparency, Debbie McCarcel-Powell should recuse herself from impeachment matters, given that her household income comes from a Ukrainian oligarch who is under investigation with very close ties to the Ukrainian president. Villarino wrote Monday in a text message, I hope she does the right thing. Villarino didn't name the oligarch, but she was referring to Ihor Kolomoisky, who has invested in companies represented by McCarcel-Powell's husband, Robert Powell. According to McCarcel-Powell's financial disclosures, her husband has for years represented companies owned at least in part by Kolomoisky, a billionaire who backed Vladimir Zelensky's successful upstart campaign for president in Ukraine. Kolomoisky's relationship with Zelensky inspired two Soviet-born South Florida men working with Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani to seek out a meeting with Kolomoisky in April, shortly after Zelensky won the election. Wow, you confused yet? Kolomoisky met with Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, but told the New York Times last month that he believed they were meeting to discuss liquefied natural gas. Instead, he said they surprised him by asking for a meeting with Zelensky, so he told them to leave. Kolomoisky accused Giuliani in Ukrainian media of attempting to orchestrate a clear conspiracy against Biden. McCarcel-Powell's campaign called Villarino's charge false and a non-issue. As the Miami Herald previously reported, Robert has never worked for or represented Ihor Kolomoisky. McCarcel-Powell spokesman Michelle Gajewski said, Republicans are desperate, attempting to distract people from the threat to our democracy, which is a republic, which is simple. President Trump asked a foreign power to interfere with our elections for his personal political gain. Okay, so I think you get where we're kind of going with this right here. But let me just take you back to the tweet from November 30th, 2019.
The Democrats, they just have done nothing. They're doing nothing, folks. They're doing nothing. So Congresswoman McCarcel-Powell, where is she? Is she here? I'd love to see her.
Hey, President Trump. It's Congresswoman Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, and I'm right here. And next time you want to talk about the bills that we've already passed to lower prescription drug prices, protect our communities from gun violence, or even prevent vaping deaths, please give me a call. Or you can find me next week in the Judiciary Committee, where I'm going to be working to protect our country and the American people from your attacks on our democracy. Because unlike my Republican colleagues in Washington, I'm not afraid of you. But if you're going to attack me, please, at least say my name correctly. It's Congresswoman Debbie Mucarsel-Powell. Gracias.
She's so brave. She's so brave. I stand with Mucarsel. I stand with Mucarsel. All right, well, it looks like Mucarsel is part of the Mu Cartel. This is from July 2018. This is the other Miami Herald link. Congress candidate's husband has financial ties to scandal-plagued Ukrainian oligarch. The husband of a Miami Democrat hoping to unseat U.S. Rep. Carlos Curbelo this November has financial ties to an Eastern European oligarch dogged by allegations of contract killings and embezzlement. Charming. Public records show that Debbie Mucarsel-Powell's husband, Robert Powell, spent much of the last 10 years as general counsel for companies owned at least in part by Igor Kolomoisky, a wealthy Ukrainian businessman involved in banking and mining. In federal financial disclosures, Mucarsel-Powell reported that her husband of 15 years earned most of their household income during the previous 2 years, at least $695,000. That's a good grip of corn right there from a ferroalloys trading corporation associated with Kolomoisky. Mucarsel-Powell, considered by national Democrats as one of the most likely challengers to defeat a Republican incumbent in November's midterm elections, says her husband's work and the companies that employed him are irrelevant to her campaign. Well, let's get what they're saying here. I have never worked for, represented, answered to, or received any payment from Mr. Kolomoisky at any time, Powell said in a statement issued through his wife's campaign. But court filings show that Kolomoisky at different times has owned, directly or indirectly, a third of Optima, all of Fellman Productions, for which Fellman Trading is a distributor, and a piece of GAA. In a 2010 court order, a federal judge in West Virginia, where Fellman Trading operates a manganese production facility on the Ohio River, said it appeared that Powell answers to Kolomoisky. The same court order states that Fellman Productions was a subsidiary of a company owned by a Kolomoisky firm, and that Fellman was one of 3 shareholders in Private Bank, the largest commercial bank in Ukraine. Okay, so I think you see where this is all going. Even though impeachment has completely fallen apart, I imagine there's going to be some new articles or some new bombshells. Like Devin Nunes said the other day, people like Gerald Nadler are never going to let this go. And at this point, I don't think Nancy Pelosi can either. But it's amazing. All these impeachment frontliners all seem to be linked to Ukraine. So you can see where their panic starts to grow and their rhetoric starts to grow, and they start to make this really, really tough talk. It's about the only thing that they can do at this point. And the more frustrated they get, the more unhinged they get. But we can see just another classic example of the Democratic Party con. Well done, Anons. Let's move on. Post 3820, 22 minutes after the hour of 12, we see this familiar meme right here. Haven't you figured it out yet? It's not about Trump's corruption. It's about making sure you don't find out about their corruption. And there's our usual suspects right there. Little Adam Schiff looking at Nancy Pants Pelosi like, hey, I thought you said this impeachment thing was going to be all okay. I don't think that's okay today. And Nancy Pelosi's like, I don't know what to say today. I didn't expect it to go this way. And Elijah Cummings like, I know, right? This whole impeachment thing's got me dead, yo. All right, that was maybe a little too far. Gerald Nadler's like, I don't think I'm going to start feeling well. I better go home soon. Anyway, there is a Fox News link right here. And this is from an October 3rd article. Adam Schiff, Ukraine connection comes under scrutiny. And actually, instead of the article, I'd actually like to play a little bit from this. This was from Ingraham Angle, I believe, on this second. And I believe that this broadcast is a little bit more informative. So I made you a montage.
Oh, it's a montage, because we ain't trying to watch the whole dang thing now.
And Adam Schiff's Ukraine connections, how deep do they go? First, I want you all to meet Soviet-born arms dealer Igor Pasternak. He's the founder and CEO of Worldwide Eros Corp. Pasternak grew up in Ukraine, but some 25 years ago, his company moved to a location near Schiff's district in Southern California. Since that time, Pasternak continued to receive lucrative surveillance and weapons deals from Ukraine's government. Here's where Schiff enters the picture. In 2013, Pasternak hosted a fundraiser for Schiff. No big deal, right? That's until you realize how Adam Schiff's priorities completely shifted. Now, before this time, Schiff rarely, if ever, mentioned Ukraine. But after the fundraiser, he used multiple television appearances to basically demand that we send money and arms to them.
I think that the United States should be very forward-leaning on the Ukraine. I do think that we ought to provide stronger cooperation to Ukraine. Our military support of Ukraine is an important message to our allies in the region that we will back them up.
You want the United States right now to not only provide humanitarian aid to Ukraine, but also start providing serious weapons, right?
I do, and I think it's overdue.
Well, you believe the Schiff involvement with Ukraine makes a lot of sense. How so?
Well, I mean, I think it's part of a larger pattern we've seen over the last 3 years regarding the entire Russiagate hoax operation. I mean, first of all, we have Christopher Steele, who we know is working for Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska. We had the producers of the Steele dossier from Fusion GPS, and they were also working for Russian oligarchs. And of course, the press has picked up on none of these things. These are the different things that they turned a blind eye to, and instead they fabricate relations and alliances between the Trump team and all sorts of figures in Russia.
Well,
and
I went back and I looked at some of the liberals who were writing about Schiff and this guy Pasternak, who did a couple fundraisers for him. Nothing illegal about doing fundraisers for him, but the liberals were kind of concerned that someone like Schiff would be the one they choose to go after Trump, because Schiff was at that time kind of a middle of the road, even if trending toward more of a, war hawk. I think Raytheon PAC might have given him some money at some point. So the liberals were not all that wild about the idea of the Schiff character pushing the Trump narrative, because they thought he's kind of a pro-military expenditure, rah-rah, get more money over to these other governments. They weren't thrilled about that. What else have you found?
Well, I mean, he was running against Obama administration policy there. So insofar now that we see the Democratic Party is all in lockstep on Trump Russia and now Trump Ukraine, I mean, he was going against Obama administration policy regarding Ukraine and Russia at the time. Look, there's another issue as well with Mr. Pasternak. And I want to be very clear about this. I think it's something that we should start to look into and we should know about. But that, as you said, Mr. Pasternak started getting involved in, started doing deals with the Ukrainian defense industry, starting at the time that the conflict began in 2014. And now one of his projects with the Ukrainian defense industry is under investigation. It's not him and it's not his company itself, but it's the deal that's under investigation in the Ukraine. And that investigation started July 22nd. So I just think that there are different threads that we need to pull out here and find out exactly what's going on, especially since Representative Schiff is throwing out a lot of baseless charges. But again, it would be interesting to know, since people are making so many charges about Ukraine and Russia, let's get to the bottom of it all.
Yeah, let's just... And it did seem that his focus became more Ukraine-centered after his Pasternak.
Well, this is another thing that I believe that probably Attorney General William Barr and U.S. Attorney John Durham, I believe that they must be looking into this. They must be looking into, we know that they're looking into foreign influence and they're looking at certain countries. One of the other things that I suspect they're looking at is the different relationships that people who are involved in the dossier and Russiagate operation, what are the relations that they have with Ukraine? What are the relationships that they have with Russia as well? These are important questions, and again, I hope that they're getting to the bottom.
So there you have it, and like I alluded to yesterday, that I was planning on making a little bit more of an in-depth video on the Schiff family, but their involvement, not just in Ukraine, but really in the destabilization of Russia, and really a lot of different nations. They've been a part of this for a very long time. But knowing the connections between Schiff and Soros, Ukraine, and of course that desire to destabilize the region there, it shouldn't really surprise us that this would happen right in Adam Schiff's district. And of course, I think one of the key things to take away from that interview is that Lee Smith mentioned that this should be part of the investigation for Barr and Durham, and I have a feeling that's probably exactly the case, and that's exactly why Q is pumping this stuff out, and that's exactly why at least Fox or some conservative media outlets are trying to get some of that pumped out as well. And I'm sure Adam Schiff doesn't think that's okay. But we're going to move on anyway. 38:21, 41 minutes after the hour of 12. Who was the 17th director of the NSA? I know, and you do too. This article is from the Washington Post, November 19th, 2016. And I want you to remember that date. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, I believe this was released on the 18th. I'm not certain there, but I'm pretty sure it was the 18th. Anyway, the title says, Pentagon and intelligence community chiefs have urged Obama to remove the head of the NSA. The heads of the Pentagon and the nation's intelligence community have recommended to President Obama that the director of the NSA, Admiral Michael S. Rogers, be removed. The recommendation, delivered to the White House last month, was made by Defense Secretary Ashton B. Carter and Director of National Intelligence James R. Can't Shut Your Yapper Clapper Jr., according to several U.S. officials familiar with the matter. Now, dig this because it's really key in this third paragraph. Action has been delayed, some administration officials said, because relieving Rogers of his duties is tied to another controversial recommendation: to create separate chains of command at the NSA and the Military Cyber Warfare Unit. And I'm sorry I'm on a paywall here, but I think we can tell a lot of this story here in the dates. But remember that. So it sounded like he was kind of bucking the NSA, right? And there was probably very good reason for that, because we were seeing that there was a lot of spying going on. But remember that he was working on this military cyber warfare unit. Well, what kind of cyber warfare have we been seeing going on for the last couple years? But let's go back to the date, November 19th, 2016. In June of 2016, we had a FISA request, and this involved communications that did involve Donald Trump and a lot of his advisors and whatnot. And then later in October 2016, we had another FISA request. Now, this one was in regards to a server that was actually in Trump Tower. Remember, they wanted to bug Trump Tower. So this is likely how they got it, through this October 2016 FISA request. And this came from the Obama administration. So then we had the elections, November 8, 2016. And then, of course, the results came a day later. And then it was November 17th, I know, where Admiral Mike Rogers went to New York and met with then President-elect Donald Trump, likely to warn him that he was being bugged, right? Well, it was the very next day, and that's why I make a big deal about the date of this article, because I believe it was the very next day, the 18th, was when the Washington Post published this article recommending that Mike Rogers be removed from the NSA. Now, if it was indeed the 19th, it's still 2 days later, but I believe it was actually the very next day. So you can see that this is very key. They obviously knew that Mike Rogers was on to them, and that's why they wanted to get rid of him, particularly James Clapper. Remember, this guy is the DNI. He had all the info, and it was likely held on these servers. Remember, these servers were housed by what? Amazon. Amazon is what? Jeff Bezos, Washington Post. You get the idea. And then by the 19th, Reuters had also published another article in regards to this, and this is when the hits really started to come out. Now, also remember that once Admiral Mike Rogers left, he went to go join an Israeli private security firm. They're called Team 8, and I'm sure it's just a complete coincidence that their logo happens to be the same logo as 8chan, which is now 8kun. Totally coincidental. So by now you should be picking up what I'm putting down, and I'm going to ask you a familiar question. Why is this relevant? In 38:22, we find out 44 minutes after the hour of 12, we see another Q proof here. And on the left is post 3389 from July 9th, 2019. And then on the right side is a little snippet from The Intercept posted on December 20th, 2019. So over here it says AG and Rogers meeting, Durham and Rogers meeting, Why did Rogers retire? Why did Rogers visit POTUS and Trump Tower without authorization shortly after a SCIF was installed? Because he knew this was a matter of national security, and he had to make a choice at this point, right? He knew that the spying was going on. He knew right when it happened. And I would say right around this moment, too, Nunes was starting to find out. There were other people that were starting to find out, but Rogers knew. And Rogers was able to do something about it. And so he had to kind of do this without authorization. It was the only way to do it. And of course, they used that as a premise to try and get rid of him. Now, keep in mind, like I said, he still went into this security company. So he's still involved in intel. And that's important to remember. Why did select former ABC directors, meaning Alphabet agency directors, call for the removal of Rogers? Why did POTUS move his transition command center base of ops from Trump Towers the very next day? Yeah, right after he got warned by Rogers, he moved his operations to Jersey. Now, on the right side is the article from The Intercept. And remember, this was a couple months later, so this was showing that Q already knew back in July. Retired Admiral Michael Rogers, former director of the National Security Agency, has been cooperating with the Justice Department's probe into the origins of the counterintelligence investigation of the Trump presidential campaign's alleged ties to Russia, according to 4 people familiar with Rogers' participation. Rogers has met the prosecutor leading the probe, Connecticut U.S. Attorney John Durham, on multiple occasions, according to 2 people familiar with Rogers' cooperation. While the substance of those meetings is not clear, Rogers has cooperated voluntarily, several people with knowledge of the matter said. Okay, so this wasn't a guy that just was familiar. He knew where the bodies were buried, and he's been working with Durham for quite some time. Q's known about it for quite some time. And of course, there was this whole sort of interference being run where we weren't really sure who exactly was going to be dropping the bombs. But we see now and we know now that Durham was really the focus all this time, right? Durham was the boat that was taking George Washington across the water. This was the whole thing this was all built upon. And of course, Admiral Mike Rogers is somebody who really knew all about this. He was the NSA director. This wasn't some chump off the street. This was somebody who knew exactly what was going on. And this has been going on really fairly quietly the whole time. And that was sort of the point, right? Because if any leaks or anything like that were getting out, this would be really, really something that could fall apart. So, should be really interesting to see what happens once this Durham investigation actually starts to surface. And that is what Q is letting us know. And I just want to let you know that this is entitled Q-Proof 137. So if you've got any ideas for 137, you can let us know down below. Let's move on. Post 3823, 48 minutes after the hour of 12, we see this very familiar picture of a very familiar American flag. And if you are relatively new to following Q or this channel or whatnot, we've seen this very same graphic many times before. Many of us have suspected that this is some sort of time placement marker or something like that. It's not just Q posting a picture of a flag. It seems to be some sort of time marker or visible marker. And I've always maintained that this thing plays tricks on my eyes, which leads me to suspect that there might be a message inside this flag. There are apps in where you can install things with basically a message inside a picture. And all I can say is that it's always played tricks on my eyes. But either way, this is entitled In God We Trust. And I thought this was very curious because, like I just mentioned, there are many of us who have thought that this could be a time marker. I am definitely one of them. Now, I want to take you back.
Got a flashback of signs, yeah, take you back, yeah.
Taking you back to post 1602. This was from back in June of 2018. Interesting timestamp there too, 45 minutes after the hour of 11. But we start off with this tweet here from Donald Trump Jr. Congrats to the Democrats who, after last night, are now officially the party of impeachment, open borders, abolishing ICE, banning the Second Amendment, and unbridled socialism. The Democrat Party of John F. Kennedy is dead. Rest in peace. And Dianon said the same thing that I was saying about the flag. This tweet struck me as odd, almost as if it were a marker of sorts. Well, that's funny. You're talking about the tweet. I'm talking about the flag. Either way, the reason I bring you down here is because it had the same keyword at the very end. In God we trust. So let's read through this here. If you continue to proceed down this dangerous path, only know that we are prepared. And it sounds to me like Q is talking to the bad actors that are also reading Q. You should know this based on earlier drops regarding Saudi Arabia, National Guard, military assets activated on U.S. soil. And of course, remember, this was right around the time that National Guard had been activated. And of course, we were cleaning out the House of Saud over there. I don't know about the whole house, but some of it. The game is over when the public knows. The fight to keep the lights off is all that matters to you. And, by now we know how many different kinds of outages we've seen. We saw a ton of outages, of course, in Australia. Some of them probably related to the fires. Maybe some of them are not. We've seen tons of them in California. We've seen them all over the United States. Tons and tons of incidents where we see the lights off. You will fail. The American people are awake. You lost control. Sheep no more. You underestimated their resolve and their ability to free think away from the pipeline narrative. We will declass. We will shine light. There is nowhere to hide. No amount of money, influence, or power can stop this. Our rights to secure and protect at all costs then become justified. We stand at the ready. Red wave, white squall. In God we trust. Q. So there you have it. Is this indeed a marker of time? Couldn't really tell you at the moment, but I will say that post 1602 got me thinking about whether or not there might be something significant about the 16th of the second month, 1602 being maybe the 16th of February. And incidentally, this latest post 3823 adds up to 16 on the 2nd of February. Connected? Couldn't really tell you. I'm not much of a numbers guy, but that's what ran through my head, and those are your Q posts. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. Thanks to all of you who do that already. If you have not subscribed to one of my other channels, please do so. They are all linked down below, as well as my email if you'd like to send me some information. And if you'd like to support the channel, my Patreon is also linked down below. If you're old school, I've got a P.O. box down there too if you want to send something. All that is down below in the video description. All right, Patriots, have a great weekend, and until next time, stay funky.